Steve Harper, until his recent retirement, was professor of spiritual formation at Asbury Theological Seminary, where they had that outbreak of the Spirit last year, if you remember, they had a revival. He tells about being in a distant city conducting a seminar on the spiritual life. Afterward, an active church member asked if he could take him to the airport. And along the way, he said to Harper, "When I became a Christian, my life was radically changed. I was regularly and meaningfully involved in the church. But over a period of time, my enthusiasm waned until today. I am a Christian, mostly by habit. I've lost the joy of my faith and sometimes wonder if I'm really a Christian at all." Are you and I like this man mentioned here? Are we simply Christians mostly by habit? Are we checking off the Ash Wednesday box tonight on our Am I a Christian worksheet? I don't think so. If we are, the prophet Joel offers some help for us tonight. But first, who is the prophet Joel, and how can his prophecy motivate us in our faith? Because I think he gives us an answer by what he said to those in Judah as well. He was the son of Pethuel. Joel means whose God is Yahweh. Pethuel means the straightforwardness or sincerity of God. And according to Pastor David Pryor in his commentary on the message of Joel, the two names together summarize the message of the book. It's entirely focused on God, and its message is completely straightforward. God is speaking directly to his people, the people of Judah. Commentators are not in agreement to when he lived or who was the king at that time. A Lutheran Study Bible suggests any time after the reign of King Jehoshaphat, which ended in 848 BC. One commentator on Bible.org that I read said he must have lived in the 8th century and prophesied during the reign of King Uzziah, somewhere between 792 and 740 BC. He said this because Joel doesn't mention Assyria, Babylon, or Persia. So apparently during King Uzzah's reign, Judah had a golden period. It was the golden age of Judah, when the Jews were prosperous. His reign expanded Judah militarily, administratively, commercially, economically. It was a time of prosperity, but unfortunately, it may have been a time when the children of Israel turned away from the Lord and started worshiping foreign gods. Things were going so well that they possibly compromised their faith in Yahweh with the Canaanite gods of the people in the Promised Land. Moses warned about this in Deuteronomy 6:10 through 12. He said this, "And when the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give you with great and good cities that you did not build, and houses full of all good things that you did not fill, and cisterns that you did not dig, and vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant. And when you eat and are full, then take care, get this, lest you forget the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." That's possible for all of us, is it not? We're not in want here. We have pretty much everything we could want or need. We have at least 400 channels via cable, do we not? I don't know that we need all those. How many QVC channels do we need, right? And how many in Spanish? That's the other thing that makes me crazy. But we pretty much have most of everything's at our fingertips. And so it is easy to forget the Lord. And I know you're here tonight because you haven't forgotten the Lord. But I've got to say it, as Joel did, we can do that very easily when our needs are met. Pastor Pryor mentions in chapter 1, as Joel does, there were 3 groups that he addresses: drunkards, farmers, and priests. Kind of a weird combination. Other prophets, though, mention farmers and drunkards as well. So there may be something more to his mentioning these. Apparently, these 2 groups and the priest were involved in murky religious practices. Some weird syncretism with some of the Canaanite gods and the way they worshiped and worshiping the God of Israel, Yahweh. So among the local mystery religions in Canaan, drunkenness was a common way for a worshiper to become united with a particular deity or Canaanite god. And also farmers, I didn't think of this, but farmers who were dependent on the land and their crops, were particularly susceptible to Canaanite fertility practices in honor of Baal and Asherah. They would have been severely tempted to turn away from being obedient to the Lord and trusting only in Him for their provision, and particularly in times of crisis. It would have been tempting to them to turn to one of the fertility cults of Baal to ensure they would have good crops. From the beginning, the Lord put heavy sanctions against any dabbling with other gods. We know that. Shall no other gods before me. And the gods of the people who were around them, he mentions in Deuteronomy 6:14. Joel consistently refers to your God and my God, and his name is Yahweh is God. So possibly there was persistent idolatry, and Joel's plea is for them to return to the one true God, Yahweh. These are just possible explanations for God's judgment on Judah. As Pastor Pryor tells us, but the strange thing is, unlike virtually every other prophet in Israel, Joel does not mention any particular sins in the nation which might have provoked the Lord to anger. So is Joel telling us we better straighten up or God's anger could come at us for anything? No, they're already experiencing God's anger at their sin, probably worshiping Canaanite gods. And may we not ever get to the same point, either as individuals or as a church, where we forget who brought us out of our slavery to sin. Who brought us out of the fear of death, and who will bring us into everlasting life in heaven. But it's easy to do. The Lord does discipline his children as he wants. Our total devotion and trust and our obedience to his character and his promises. I believe he will do whatever it takes to get our attention. This is a wake-up call for Judah. God usually gives us wake-up calls through some kind of judgment, some kind of difficulty, some kind of struggle. The author of Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews, says, let hard times be disciplined. Accept them as discipline from the Lord. Always wise to ask ourselves when we're suffering through something, what are you trying to teach me, Lord? And probably the bottom line always is trust. Trust. Trust and obey, for there's no other way, right? To be happy in Jesus. And trust and obey. Chapter 2, after telling the elders to listen to what he had to say, the drunkards to sober up, the farmers to feel ashamed, and the priests to put on sackcloth and grieve and mourn, because God has sent an army of locusts against them. And it's an epic showing of locusts, so much so that this story of the Lord's judgment is to be told to their children and their children's children, much like the story of the Exodus. You want to go mess around with foreign gods, you want to get away from the Lord, hey, he may bring some locusts into our lives, and who wants that? The locusts have destroyed the land, ruined the crops, ended the flow of wine, and Joel is sounding the alarm. The day of the Lord is coming. Now, this is not the day of the Lord, but it's a now but not yet, or it's a already but not yet. It's a picture of the day of the Lord. And Peter even quotes from it in Acts chapter 2, when the Spirit of God is given to the believers there at Pentecost, and they speak in tongues, known languages. So it's a picture of that. It's a foreshadowing thereof, of what's going to happen with the day of the Lord. So he continues in chapter 2 to describe this army of locusts that are God's judgment on Israel. Verses 10 and 11, he says, the earth quakes before them, the heavens tremble, the sun and the moon are darkened, the stars withdraw their shining. The Lord utters his voice before his army of locusts. For his camp is exceedingly great. He who executes the word is powerful. For the day of the Lord is great and very awesome. Who can endure it? Pryor says the day of the Lord is any day that the Lord steps into history to do a special work of judgment or deliverance. For Joel, the locust plague feels like a build-up to such a day for Israel. The locusts are executioners of the purposes and commands of God to get them back to Yahweh. And he will do the same in our lives. I'm quite convinced of that. Every child he has, he disciplines. He'll bring us back. He'll do whatever it takes. He's utterly committed to us. The locusts, a vast, vast army, like horses, Joel said. The people are devastated. The prophet is devastated. It's all but the ultimate day of the Lord. Who can endure it? No one will escape. Pryor asks, or will they? Could anyone escape the day of the Lord? But he doesn't leave them there. He offers them and us a solution to our problem of turning away from or forgetting the Lord, so we don't encourage judgment here and now or on the day of the Lord. Right after saying who can endure it, he offers them and us a way to get back with the Lord. He tells them in verses 12 to 13, yet even now. Now this is while the locusts are destroying everything. So you think, man, they're done. He's done with them, right? I mean, locusts are in town. It's all over. There's no crops, there's no wine, there's nothing. Devastated everything. Yet even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. Signs of death, like a funeral. Die to yourselves. That's what Jesus told us, did he not? Pick up our cross daily and follow him. Deny yourself. Return to him with all your heart. Notice it isn't return to him with all your mind. Return to him with all your religious practices. Or return to him broken. Broken. We've forgotten the Lord or away from him, simply return to him, but with all your heart, not some of it. Joel tells them to rend their hearts, not their garments, with fasting, weeping, and mourning. So I ask us all this evening, are there areas of our heart that we haven't surrendered to the Lord? You know what I mean when you have friends over and you want to take them, they haven't seen your house, you want to take them on a tour of your house? You show them this is the living room, this is the study, this is the playroom, this is the... no, you can't go into that room. That room. No, there's nothing in there anyway. And you and I both know there's nothing but junk in there. We should have organized it long ago. We didn't. We don't want anybody to see it. Do we have that going on with the Lord? We just got some rooms in our heart. You can't have that, Lord. You know? That's up to us to open those doors. Remember, Jesus said in Revelation 3:20, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone opens the door, I will come in with and sup with them, and they with me. It's fellowship. That's what that's about. But the knob is on the inside. We have to turn. We have to let him in to those areas of our lives. And that's something to do this Lent. Next, he tells them, remember who God is. Return. Remember who God is. He says in verses 13 and 14, return to the Lord your God, for he's gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. And he relents over disaster. Same thing Jonah was upset about. He said, I know you were that kind of God. And he said almost this exact same thing. You know who said it first? Moses. Moses said it in Exodus. He said, he's gracious, merciful, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. Luther didn't think he was slow to anger. Those of us who were raised Catholic didn't think he was slow to anger. You know? I was told that when I went into the church and Jesus was on the crucifix, that if I talked in church, I was nailing his hands into the cross further. So he had every right to get me. And lightning was a problem for quite a while, just as it was for Luther. He's slow to anger. The word patience in Greek is makrothumia. Macro, great, large, big, right? Macroeconomics. Thumia, wrath. Long wrath. Long fuse. He has a long fuse. And am I not glad he did with me? Have a very long fuse, because he could have taken me out a couple times. My walk with the Lord. Yeah, he's slow to anger. Abounding in steadfast love. Steadfast love is the Hebrew word hesed. I love that word. It's faithful, unconditional, will be there for you all the time kind of love. Never turn away from you. I'm committed to you. That's what he's saying. And he's committed to the Mosaic covenant, right? That, if you do what's right, I'll bless you. If you don't, I'll curse you. But he would never leave them even when they went away from him. What's he trying to do? Get them back to himself. Return to me. Get them back. He wants that relationship. Does he need a relationship with me and you? No, right? Where's the relationship solid, perfect, unconditional, wonderful, unimaginable? The Trinity. They love each other. They didn't need us to complete themselves. He didn't have to create us. Oh, I'm lacking something in my life. I better create some people who will rebel against me, and every thought of their heart will be wicked. Genesis 6. He doesn't need us. He wanted us. And he wants to be in right relationship with us all the time. And when we stray, just like the Israelites did, he will come and make his presence known. Maybe we've forgotten who God is. We come back to him. He'll be gracious, merciful, slow to anger, abounding in limitless, unconditional hesed love. Usually when we forget the Lord or go against his commands, we're isolated from other believers. That's happened in my life. When I was isolated and not attending church and not being with other believers, that's when I got way far away from the Lord. Joel tells them next, reconnect with each other. Return, remember, reconnect. Blow the trumpet in Zion, consecrate a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the people, consecrate the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children, even nursing infants. Let the bridegroom leave his room and the bride her chamber. This is important. The community has got to get it right. They've all got to come back together to the Lord. Spirituality just isn't a personal thing. It's also with all of us. They need to worship together as God wants them to be a holy nation, and he wants us to be a holy people as well. Hebrews 10:24 and 25 tells us the same. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. The same day Joel was talking about it here in Hebrews. The day of the Lord is going to happen. He's coming back. And we as believers will stand in front of him at the judgment seat of Christ for rewards. And if we did things to the glory of God, building on Jesus Christ as our foundation with gold, silver, and precious stones, usually thought of those things that we do for the glory of God, we will be rewarded. If we build it up for our own glory, guess what? Wood, hay, and stubble will all be burned up. We'll be saved, but so is by fire. We'll just be burned up. I hope I'm not real smoky going into the kingdom. That's my plan. I don't want to be. So we are going to stand there. And then unbelievers are going to stand before the Lord as well. He tells us about that in Matthew 11, where he says, oh, you, Bethsaida and Chorazin, if you had revelation like Tyre and Sidon did, you would have believed long ago. And their judgment will be greater because they had greater light. And so that judgment is coming. So lastly, Joel says, request God's mercy. In verse 17, he says, spare your people, O Lord, and make not your heritage a reproach, a byword among the nations. Why should they say among the peoples, where is their God? So he appealed to God that your name is going to be besmirched. These other nations, these Canaanites, are going to say, where's the Israelites' God? Why isn't he doing anything? And so that's a legitimate prayer to God as well, to ask him for his mercy. Lord, we need you. I don't want to let you down. I don't want your name to be besmirched or put down by other people. What's amazing to me is that the Lord responds in grace and mercy before the people do what Joel tells them to do. Clearly, the Lord remained loyal to his covenant. And we can know the same this Lenten season. They hadn't yet repented. Joel's just telling them what to do. They haven't done it. And God gives them, he relents, he pulls back. And he starts giving them oil and wine again, crops and rain. That's a gracious God. Now, hopefully they did it. I think they probably did. And it's easy to remember, or it's easy to forget, rather, when Jonah did that with the Ninevites, they repented. They believed in the God of Israel. They did what Jonah said. Jonah hated it. But what's interesting is we have another prophet named Nahum who went to Nineveh as well, 150 years later. And Nineveh was destroyed. They forgot all that. So may we remember God's faithful. He wants to be with us in deep, close personal relationship. And we can always return to him no matter what's happening. And Paul tells us in 2 Timothy 2:13, if we are faithless, as the people of Judah were, he remains faithful, for he cannot disown himself. God remains faithful. His mercies are renewed every morning. He has an extremely long fuse when it comes to expressing his anger. Let's return to him this Lent. Remember his character, reconnect with each other, and request that he restore us whenever we turn away from him or forget him, so we might know him in the power of his resurrection, being made conformable even unto his death. And all God's people said. Saying the Nicene Creed as it is a feast day, Ash Wednesday.